He ran onto the stage the way he always does, like the floor was on fire and the only safe place was the front of the room. The audience lost their minds before he even opened his mouth. Kevin Hart bounded through the curtain at full speed, arms wide, face already doing everything at once. That enormous grin, those wide eyes, the whole magnificent machine of a man who had spent his entire life perfecting the art of filling a room with something good. He pointed at people. He did a voice. He nearly knocked over a camera operator and then made that part of the bit. 300 people were on their feet before Stephen could say his name, and Kevin was already working them, already turning the applause into material, already making the moment his the way he made every moment his, completely, immediately, without hesitation. This was Kevin Hart, being Kevin Hart. This was the only version of himself he had ever shown anyone. The Late Show set glowed under its signature blue and crimson lights, Manhattan humming softly behind the skyline backdrop. Stephen met him at the desk with that warm smile, the two of them falling immediately into the kind of banter that happens when two people are genuinely comfortable with each other. Kevin was promoting a new project, a production company, a film, something that spoke to the next chapter of a career that had already contained more chapters than most people's entire lives. He was 44 years old and showed no signs of slowing down, which was itself a kind of performance, and which Stephen knew better than to take entirely at face value. For the first 10 minutes, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Funny, loud, generous, Kevin Hart at full volume, which was the only volume he publicly acknowledged having. And then Stephen set down his note cards. "Kevin," he said, leaning forward with the particular stillness he reserved for the questions that actually mattered. "I want to ask you something I've been thinking about since we booked this conversation." Kevin grinned. "Uh-oh." "When you were a kid," Stephen said, "growing up in Philadelphia, what did laughter mean in your house?" The grin held for a moment. Kevin leaned back slightly, the way a person does when a question has arrived somewhere they weren't expecting it to go. He recovered quickly. He always recovered quickly. That was the skill. That was the whole apparatus. And opened his mouth to give the answer he had given 100 times before, the one about North Philadelphia and the hustle in making something from nothing. But Stephen was watching him. And Stephen Colbert had been doing this long enough to know the difference between a man reaching for a prepared answer and a man reaching for the real one. The grin faded, just slightly, just enough. "Laughter in my house," Kevin said slowly, "was a warning sign." The studio went quieter than it had been all night. "My dad was an addict," Kevin said. His voice was different now. Still his voice, still that distinctive Philadelphia cadence, but stripped of performance, stripped of the timing that usually governed every word he spoke publicly. "Crack cocaine, for most of my childhood. And when you grow up in a house with addiction, you learn to read the room. You learn to feel the temperature of a space before you walk into it. You learn that silence can mean a lot of different things, and most of them are bad." Stephen didn't move. "But laughter," Kevin paused. "Laughter meant it was okay. For right now, in this moment, it was okay. Nobody was fighting. Nobody was disappearing. Nobody was about to do something that would change everything. If I could make my mom laugh, I knew we were safe. If I could make my brother laugh, I knew tonight was going to be all right." He looked at his hands. "I didn't learn to be funny because I wanted to entertain people. I learned to be funny because it was the only way I knew how to check if everyone was okay." The silence in the studio was complete. "How old were you?" Stephen asked softly. "When you figured that out?" Kevin thought for a moment. 7, he said. "Maybe 8. You figure it out fast when you need to." Stephen nodded once. "My dad was the funniest man I ever knew," Kevin continued, and something shifted in his voice when he said it. Something that hadn't been there before. Something that sounded like it had been stored somewhere for a long time. People don't know that about him. They know the addiction. They know the absence. But before all of that, before it took hold, he was genuinely, naturally, effortlessly funny. The kind of funny that doesn't need an audience, the kind of funny that's just how he saw the world. He stopped. "I get it from him," Kevin said quietly. "All of it. The timing, the instinct, the need to make the room feel better. That's his. I just got to use it because the disease took it from him before he could." Stephen stood up from behind his desk. Quietly, without announcement. He walked around to Kevin's side and sat on the edge of the desk, facing him. Not the host anymore. Just a man sitting with another man who was saying something true. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. "Kevin," Stephen said, his voice low and careful, "you just described something that a lot of people in this country understand and almost nobody talks about. Growing up with a parent in addiction. Learning to manage a room before you're old enough to manage yourself." Kevin nodded. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright in a way that had nothing to do with the stage lights. "What was the first time you made your dad laugh?" Stephen asked. "Do you remember it?" Kevin was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher. "I was 9, he said. He was having a good day. And when you're a kid with an addict parent, you learn to recognize good days the way other kids recognize Christmas. You hold on to them. You try to make them last." He paused. "I did this bit. This whole physical thing I'd been working on in my room for weeks, practicing in front of the mirror, falling down, getting back up, falling down a different way." And he laughed. He laughed so hard he had tears coming down his face, and he looked at me and he said, "Boy, where did you get that from?" A beat of silence. And I wanted to say, "I got it from you. I got it from watching you." But I was 9, so I just shrugged. Kevin's voice caught slightly. "That's the thing about being a kid. You don't have the words yet for the most important things." Stephen looked at him for a long moment. "Do you have them now?" he asked. Kevin looked at Stephen. Something moved across his face, the particular expression of a man who has been asked the right question at the right moment and doesn't quite know what to do with the accuracy of it. "Dad," he said, looking into the camera. Not at the audience, not at Stephen, but somewhere beyond all of it. "Everything I do up there, every joke, every show, every time I walk out on a stage and make a room full of strangers feel like everything's going to be okay, that's yours. I learned it watching you. I learned it trying to protect you. I learned it trying to make you laugh on the good days so maybe the good days would last a little longer." He paused. "I carry you up there with me every single time. Every single one." The first tear came then. Kevin didn't wipe it away immediately. He let it sit there on his face. This man who had built an entire empire on the premise that he could control any room, any moment, any emotional temperature. And he let the tear be there, visible, real, without making it into a bit or a callback or a punchline. Stephen stayed where he was on the edge of the desk. He didn't reach for tissue. He didn't signal to producers. He just sat there and let Kevin be in it. "You know what I think?" Stephen said finally. Kevin looked at him. "I think your father gave you something that addiction couldn't take away, because he gave it to you before it took hold. He passed it down, that way of seeing the world, that instinct to make the room feel better. And you've been using it to take care of people ever since. Millions of them. Strangers you'll never meet who needed a room to feel okay and found one every time you walked onto a stage." Kevin pressed his hand over his mouth briefly, then lowered it. "He's clean now," Kevin said. "Has been for years. We have a real relationship. We talk. We laugh together." A pause. "But sometimes I look at him and I think about that little kid practicing in front of the mirror, trying to figure out the right combination of movements that would make his dad laugh on a good day. And I think, that kid had no idea what he was building. He thought he was just trying to help his family get through the night." Stephen nodded slowly. He was, he said. And he did. And he kept doing it. For 40 years, for millions of people. Kevin looked out at the audience, not performing for them, just seeing them. If you grew up in a house where laughter was a survival tool, he said, his voice steady now, where you learned to read a room before you learned to read a book, I want you to know something. That skill, that thing you developed to get through something hard, it didn't leave when the hard thing left. It became who you are. And who you are is someone who knows how to make people feel safe. That's not a small thing. He paused. That's everything. The applause that followed started slowly. It built not like a wave, but like a tide. Inevitable, patient, impossible to stop once it had decided to come in. Stephen looked out at the room, then back at Kevin. You ran onto the stage tonight like the floor was on fire, he said. But now I understand where that comes from. You've been running toward the people who need the room to be okay since you were 7 years old. That's not performance. That's purpose. Kevin laughed then. A real one, sudden and unguarded. The kind that surprises the person laughing more than anyone else. He pressed his hand to his eyes, shaking his head. Man, he said, I did not come here to do this tonight. Nobody ever does, Stephen said. That's usually when it matters most. As the show wound down and the lights shifted toward the closing segment, something had changed in the studio that couldn't be changed back. 300 people had come to watch a comedian promote a project. They were leaving having witnessed something that had nothing to do with promotion and everything to do with the reason human beings need comedy in the first place. Not to escape the hard things, to survive them. Kevin Hart learned to make people laugh in a house in North Philadelphia where laughter meant safety. He took that skill and built an empire with it. And on this Thursday night, under the blue and crimson lights of a late-night television set, he finally said out loud what he had never quite found the words. 4 at 9 years old. I got it from you, Dad. All of it. That night, laughter gave way to grace, and television remembered what it was for.